And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with Scoop Duck on 3, coming to you from Long Beach, California. It is Wednesday, May 15th, 2024, and we got a special guest on today's episode of the pod as former Oregon offensive lineman Geoff Schwartz joins the program. But before we get into that, the Ducks Dish podcast is brought to you in part by Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are tonight, but head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Try their homemade tortillas. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy Ruben and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Like I said, we are joined on today's episode by Geoff Schwartz, former Duck offensive lineman. Geoff, how are you? Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for what feels like the season coming up pretty closely.
Yeah, it feels like it's getting really close, even though we're like 3 months away. I mean, the way that this off season's kind of flown by for me, I think February was really slow because of the dead period with recruiting, but now it feels like things are kind of kicking into high gear here. So once we get to the summer, it'll kind of feel like football season's here. So I got a couple of topics that I wanted to hit on with you today as we talk some Ducks and maybe some big picture stuff. This one's a little bit of a loaded question, but I think it's a cool place to start. So, Geoff, you played at Oregon from 2004 to 2007, and the program's hot right now. They are at I would feel like a pretty different place compared to where, compared to when you were there. So I just wanted to throw this out there, kind of where maybe some of the differences you see in the program from when you were there to where they're at now.
Well, obviously the commitment to recruiting and understanding the name of the sport now is different than when I was there, right? I mean, we were recruiting 2-star, 3-star kids, which you need to have some of those players in your program. But when I got there, we had sort of Cam Colvin, Jonathan Stewart. We started picking up the pace a little bit with some of these higher ranked guys. But I think that the biggest thing now, obviously, is the landscape of college football has changed with NIL and the transfer portal. And I feel like Oregon was positioned in a way to take advantage of this new landscape better than any other program. They were ready to go, man. Like when this became a thing, Oregon was ready to go. And the more information that we get about the collective and the way it's run and the way it's, the coaches use the portal, it's just a very well-run operation. I think Oregon had been waiting for this opportunity to put the full resources that they've been preparing in the background on full display now that this is all legal. I think that's what Oregon does best in general in the athletic department is they're always looking forward, right? They're always evolving. They're never looking back, never adapting. When I was there, we started doing the jerseys, right? We weren't looking backwards. We're looking forwards and innovating and adapting. And so I feel like just the way they're able to push the envelope now is different than when I was there. And it's really fun to see because I think that RO 17 probably wins the championship, but that was more of a just sort of a confluence of events where guys just were so kind of good in a class, like you're not getting many 2-star Max Ungers anymore out of Hawaii, right? Like that's not a thing you're getting anymore, right? Like that Max Unger is a 4-star, 5-star kid coming out of high school, probably a 4-star now. I was a low 3-star. Like you're not getting those. I'm a 4-star now, right? So, Dennis Dixon wasn't good, and all of a sudden he went away for a summer, came back, and was that much better. Dixon's probably in the portal now, right? So it's just so different. But the amount of depth the team has now and the way that they're building their roster is something that we just didn't do. And it gives you hope as an Oregon fan that the winning will continue.
Yeah, I like what you said just about how Oregon is perfectly positioned to capitalize on where the sport is at right now. And that's a topic I wanted to get into a little bit later on in the show. But the depth that you talked about, I feel like even if you look at this Oregon team back in 2016, for example, I think one of the guys that I think about is Thomas Graham, the DB out of Southern California, who's now, I think, in the NFL doing his thing. But he was kind of thrown into the fire as a true freshman. And one of the big differences between the Ducks now and then is, I mean, he was a great player, don't get me wrong, but I think he was thrown into the fire because he was the best that they had. And they didn't have that much in the cupboard. But now you look at this team, and to your point, the depth is just remarkable. You have all Americans that are waiting in the wings. You have top JUCO players like Sione Laulea who are kind of trying to find where they fit in, because you got guys like Jabbar Muhammad and Cam
Yeah.
Alexander ahead of you. So I think the roster building has really just been phenomenal, and I think it's been on this upward trend ever since Mario was there, and I think Dan Lanning just really hopped in there and has kind of kicked this thing into overdrive.
He absolutely has. Look, Mario deserves credit for, sort of maybe convincing the people in charge that recruiting mattered, and it matters a lot, and that's the way you win. And that mentality obviously is carried over into Lanning, who, look, I didn't know Lanning before he was hired. I think one thing that we can say about Rob Mullins is he hires good people, right? I mean, look at all across our sports, but he knew that Lanning was this powerhouse recruiter, and you sort of have to have young, energetic coaches now, right? And he fits that mold, and he really buys into it. He's from from the the Saban and Kirby tree, and he gets how important big bodies are and having enough depth throughout the season. So I give everyone credit for understanding you have to build the team inside out. And the portal, they do a great job in the portal, but it's supremely targeted, right? It's very like, okay, we need a third corner. Let's get Muhammad, who we saw obviously up close and personal, the way he was able to shut down Troy Franklin in that second matchup last season. And it's very targeted, right? Okay, we a backup quarterback. If we are a good football team, which I think we agree Oregon's going to be this year, having a viable backup doesn't ruin your season. Like if Gabriel's out for a game or two for whatever reason, you have a viable backup. Like just finding little things like that, man, they're important additions. Again, the team is mostly made up of players that they have recruited and brought in, but the way they're able to fill the specific parts of their roster with transfer portal players is pretty impressive to me.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about one of those key differences that you touched on, Geoff, from your time at Oregon to now. Is just the recruiting is a whole different animal. I've been covering Oregon since 2018, so fairly new, but I've also been around for a little bit and seen some of these classes that have come and gone at Oregon. So Dan Lanning has really struck this important balance when you look at recruiting guys from high school and the transfer portal. I think that he's shown like the formula a lot of these top tier programs know about. You build through the high school ranks. That's kind of your nucleus, the foundation of your team. But then you use the transfer portal to bring in some guys that can buffer that gap with experience or help fill some holes on your roster. And I didn't think that Oregon was going to go this hard in the transfer portal, but after getting guys like a Derek Harmon and a Jabbar Muhammad, a Dante Moore, Evan Stewart, the names go on, but it really just shows that the Ducks are as all in as you could possibly be,
Yeah.
I think, heading into 2024.
The Harmon one is a good example of just sort of the depth of everything. Like they didn't need Harmon. Like I don't think their season is make or break on whether Harmon is on the roster, but it doesn't hurt to have more big bodies than your opponents, and he's 6'5", 320, those are just, they're small additions, but they go a long way. And even just preparing your offensive line to play bigger defensive linemen, possibly in the Big Ten, having that ability to have that guy on your roster. And I think Oregon has done a good job too of mixing and matching sort of length of contract, essentially, right? Like how many years you have left versus versus like just taking a bunch of 1 year guys, right? A lot of the portal players are, Muhammad's got a 1 year guy, Gabriel's a 1 year guy, but other guys are not. They're 4 year guys, right? They're 3 year guys. So they have a good blend, I think, of ages and depth pieces on the team.
They definitely do, and I like that point a lot, because you can try to get that one last year out of one of those guys that you mentioned, but then you also have someone like a Dante Moore who has multiple years, or even a Peyton Woodyard who has all 4 years remaining, which is a really a unique balance of roster management that I don't think is talked about quite enough. I know a lot of casuals or, other college football fans look at what Oregon's doing in the portal, and they maybe have some gripes about
Yeah.
how they're managing things. But I think that they're more than equipped to really be competitive in this first year in
Yeah.
the Big Ten and really try to win the whole thing, honestly.
Look, man, I think if you looked at talent on the team relative to the rest of the sport, they're probably in the top 5, right? Ohio State, Georgia, maybe Alabama, Texas, Oregon's right there. Look, I would love for us to win a championship. Don't get me wrong, man. We've had our hearts ripped out many times talking about winning championships. Like, I will think about it when we get there, type of thing. Like, I think our team is supremely talented to do this. The one thing I think is a little under talked about, and it's an important part of the growth of the program, is this is Dan Lanning's 3rd season as a head coach ever. We look at what a guy like Urban Meyer did, 2nd year at Florida, won a championship. Well, he also was a head coach at Bowling Green in Utah beforehand. Like, he had a little bit of seasoning. We look at the Washington games this year. Kalen DeBoer has been a head coach for many years. It takes time to learn how to coach. And again, this is not Dan Lanning's 22-5, man. He's doing a heck of a job, Max. Like, this is not at all a knock on Dan Lanning. 4 of those games have been by 4 points or less. He lost, and he's basically blown everyone else out. Like, he's done an incredible job. But I think it's not talked about how it takes sort of growth, right? Like, thinking, okay, we're talented enough just to win the championship. It took Kirby 6 years at Georgia, right? It was his first head coaching job. It just sort of takes time, and we're not patient, right? We're a society that wants wins now. And so, like, I think that kind of goes to my point about, like, I like where Oregon's at. It would be unprecedented for Lanning to win a championship in his 3rd season as a college head coach, right? I'm sure, Bear Bryant did this or whatever, but like, someone will throw some name at me, right? But to win a championship in your 3rd year as a head coach, period, nowhere else. He's not been a coach anywhere else, not small school, not a high school. That'd be pretty unprecedented, right? To do that in a way that he has or will. So again, it can totally happen. And I'm an Oregon shirt on, man. I'm rooting for it, but I'm always just kind of cautious, like, I think that it takes time to build a program where you get it running in that championship way. It takes time to get the players that you want. This is the first year since when, Max, we've had a returning offensive coordinator. 5 years, 6, 7 years.
Been a long time.
And so I think we're in a great position for success in 2024. I just don't look at it as like a championship or bust. Like, I think it's a continual building of the program to set the foundation for, like, eventually, I think we will win a championship in 5 years. Like, I think there'll be, at some point we'll win. The last part too, that's important to talk about, the 12-team playoff makes it way harder to win a championship.
Yeah, I've been thinking that too.
I've said this for 2 years now. Okay, a 4-team playoff, you're Washington last year. You win 1 game, you're lucky in game 2. It's all you need right now. Obviously, the ramp against Michigan didn't happen. Oregon beats Florida State. Ohio State beats the shit out of them. You can, like, what if it goes backwards, right? Like, you win the close game in game 1, and then game 2 is the kind of the lucky game. Like, it can totally happen that way. But now you have to win 3 games in a row or 4 games in a row. Like, if you looked at what people preview the bracket to be, I saw Oregon as a 5 seed this year, right? So you're going to have to beat Georgia and Ohio State in back-to-back weeks to win a championship, Max. Look, can Oregon do it? Maybe. I don't know. But, like, it's a very, very tough task to ask after you play, by the way, game 1, and you have another game after that one. Like, it's just a lot. It's a lot to win those 3 or 4 games in a row.
It's certainly asking a lot. And you had a lot of great points there, Geoff. I mean, even just about how everything could look on the surface like it's aligning well for the Ducks, but at the same time, you do want to have your head coach have some more experience under his belt, maybe. And again, that's not a slight to Dan Lanning at all. That's just the reality that we find ourselves in this Oregon football community. And to his credit, I think he's doing as much as he possibly can to kind of try to bridge that gap, right? You look at maybe just a small example that's worth mentioning, the coaches clinic that they had earlier this spring, he brought in Urban Meyer and kind of had the opportunity, I'm sure,
Yeah.
to pick his brain a little bit. Bob Ladouceur, who's not a college coach, but one of the most renowned head coaches in high school
Yeah.
football from his time over at De La Salle. But I also like what you said about just the structure of the 12-team playoff and how that kind of presents an additional challenge for Oregon. If you just look how their schedule sets up this year, obviously everybody's going to have that October 12th game against Ohio State scheduled, because I think you have a good chance of both teams being undefeated. And then that's when you really have
Yeah.
your first opportunity to be like, hey, what kind of team do we really have here? Because this is a playoff caliber
Yeah.
team that is kind of on Oregon's level. But they end the season with Washington. Washington's a ton of change, and I think people feel good about Oregon's chances there. But it's a rivalry game. You can never count anything out. It's
Yeah.
at the end of your season, and then maybe you win that game and you go to the Big Ten conference championship game. Like, you just have to win more high quality,
Yeah.
more difficult games to make that thing
Yeah.
happen.
And look, again, this is sort of where I think the growth of the program is in the right direction, because one thing that if you've noticed, we Oregon kicks the shit out of bad teams, which is a really good sign for the health of the program, right? Because that means that every week you're playing your A game. Dude, college football, man. Some weeks you're playing that crummy team, and it's just like, I don't really want to. And then you just, they had a slow start against Cal first quarter, Stanford first half, but those games ended up being 4 touchdown victories.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great sign about what Dan Lanning has done at this program, where he has made every game feel supremely important. The players have pride in playing those games, and those close rivalry losses eventually turn around, man. Like, that's the sport. The continued growth of the program, they will turn around. And so you look at the schedule this year, obviously they got to go 2-1 during that Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin sort of stretch there, right? To get to 11 wins, I think. But look, a 10-2 team, you're in the playoffs at 10-2, that Ohio State game, man. Look, if anyone is flying from the East Coast to that game in their private plane and you want to hear some good stories and have some good company, I will gladly join you on your plane. I'm not going to pay you for it, but if you have extra seat, you let me know. Coming from Charlotte, I'll even fly to New York. I'll fly to Teterboro. We go to Teterboro down to all the way to Eugene. Oh man, what a game! So I love the Oregon's in the conversation each and every week. I love that we've just done a good job of putting the program in a place to really have success, man, and be talked about as one of the top dogs in the country.
To that prior point, Geoff, about blowing out subpar opponents, that's another thing that I think you have to be encouraged about with Dan Lanning, because that wasn't happening under Mario Cristobal. There were nail-biting games against Cal at home and Arizona, and I'm sure Washington State had a couple of close ones here and there. That's just kind of how.
I mean, even Washington did, right? They won like 10 games in a row by 10 points or less.
Yeah, and that's why I truly thought that Oregon was going to be able to win that Pac-12 title game. I mean, Washington was scraping by every week, it seemed. Oregon was healthy and they were playing their best ball, and then they came out super flat. But then again,
they were leading the fourth quarter.
Yeah, then they crawled back into it and didn't stop fighting. So I think that's another positive. But another thing that I think you like about Dan Lanning, if you're an Oregon fan heading into this crucial or just very important season, when is it not an important season, but feels like there's a bit more on the line with the Big Ten and the expanded playoff and all of that, the roster that they have. I'd be curious to get your thoughts. I like his aggression. I mean, if you look at the uber conservativeness, if you will, of Mario Cristobal, I like that Dan Lanning's going for it on fourth down. Maybe not every time he does it, but I think you have to like that for sure. And it's him betting on his guys at the end of the day.
Well, I'd much rather he be aggressive than not aggressive, Max. Like, that's where I stand on this, right? Is it going to work? I think last year, heading into the Liberty game, they were 15 of 21 on fourth down, and that includes over 3 against Washington. So they were what? They were 15 of 18 at games that weren't Washington. Like, that's just kind of just the bad luck of it. Like, maybe you don't convert one time against Cal and you convert one against Washington and you're 12-0. So it's just, again, this is the hard part about analyzing and talking about sports, is because we want everything now. right? We are an impatient society, Max, and I'm an impatient fan. But you have to understand sometimes the process gets you to where you want to be, even if the results aren't there. And the process has gone 22-5 and an immensely talented football team after 2 seasons. Even though the results in those games that we talked about might not be the best, I think the process of how Oregon got to those results is fine. It's fine. And being aggressive, going for it, that mentality of we're always attacking our opponent, man, that plays well in the locker room. It wins you more games than not. And I'll give you an NFL example. So, Andy Reid for years was conservative coach, man. Kicked field goals, punted, wouldn't go for it, man. He got Patrick Mahomes, man. I know Patrick's great and everything, obviously best player, in NFL, but Patrick Mahomes made Andy Reid aggressive all of a sudden. All of a sudden they're winning games, like, because they're going for it on 4th down. And yes, being aggressive with the right people in place. Look, if you have a 4th string walk on, you're probably not going for it on 4th down. With Bo Nix, yeah, go for it on 4th down. So again, I like the process, by which Oregon sort of builds and plays their games. And even though the results in those couple games didn't turn out right.
That's certainly an important thing to keep in mind. And I like that point, Geoff. And even if you look down the road past 2024, look at how the Ducks are recruiting. They're going to have a top class again in 2025. And then another finer point, just the culture that they've built in the program. I think that's sustainable and built to last. The way that Lanning operates and fills his staff when there are departures, I think he's checked those boxes. You look at the Adrian Clem departure to Alik Terry. We still kind of have to see with the Demetrius Martin departure, but I think the signs are obviously looking very strong there. So things are looking up for the Ducks in a big way. I know you have a heart out, Geoff, so just wanted to see if there's anything else you wanted to add before we get you out of here.
I'm excited for the season, man. I'll be here before we know it. It's a lot of fun when your team is relevant, right? A lot of fun when you feel like you have a chance to win each and every week.
Absolutely. Well, a big thank you to Geoff for coming on. You guys can find him on Twitter/X at Geoff Schwartz. If you want to find more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at mtorresports. Subscribe to the Scoop Duck on 3 YouTube channel and check us out at scoopduck.com. You can try 1 month for just $1. Share the show with your friends and family. And thank you so much for taking some time to talk some Duck football with us. A big thank you again to Geoff for coming on. And we'll see you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.